afternoon. We're glad to have all of you here. We're excited to have the two presenters, and of course, we did not plan the luncheon today, so we had no idea originally that it was going to be right before this, but I think you're going to find this a fascinating session today with the two people we have speaking. I'm Jane Patterson. I've met most of you in the hallways, it seems, as the president of Rural Telecommunications Congress, and we have a number of our board members who are in here, and we have one past president here. He's pressed into service to make everybody sign up. So thanks very much, Galen.
Like the hawk.
Yeah.
I'm watching it.
Galen's from Utah. We range all the way
Arizona.
from Utah. I'm sorry, Arizona. Sorry about that. Arizona in the east, they all look the same.
I used to sing in the choir.
So anyway.
Western Utah, I sang in the choir.
So
That's what
he's
you remember.
Arizona, I'm sorry, and then Frank is from Montana here. We have Eric from Tennessee back there. But I was trying to see who else. We have Drew from Utah, so he's from Utah. And I'm trying to see who else is in here as a board member. Anybody speak up, raise your hand, I can recognize you. But anyway, they're in and around. So we're going to start first with the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. There's a guy called Wheaton Gibson, for some of you, you'll find very interesting. And Mark is Johnson's going to be talking about this. Mark's with MCNC and NC-REN, which is North Carolina's Research and Education Network. And he goes back a long ways. I just want to say that he's worked with everyone from Project Abilene with Al Gore to the whole initiative in North Carolina of NC-REN, which is the first ATM Sonnet network in the country that was, I might say, fueled by FedEx 150 switch of Fujitsu, and where I worked as the sort of chairman of the committee that sort of oversaw that information highway, and did a book in Japan for Fujitsu called Digital Communities, which you can't read unless you read Japanese, so it doesn't help very much in terms, but it was a bestseller anyway in Japan. And so Mark has also been the person who helped organize the QUILT, which is all the research education networks in the United States. And he's been the person who they pressed into service to run US UCAN out of the omnibus, the stimulus a couple of years ago. And he's on the Schools and Libraries board. In other words, he is so connected he could be the Internet of Things. So anyway, I'm going to ask him now to start. He's got a very interesting presentation. So, Mark?
Thanks, Jane. Jane asked me to do this, and I told her I didn't know anything about the Internet of Things. So I was going to have to make something up. So my approach is probably going to be a little more personal and concrete than the one at lunch, and hopefully highlight a couple of key things about what will be important for the Internet of Things taking off. So, and I guess I should back up a second. So the point of this slide is there are at least some existence proofs of what the Internet of Things can do, and I have an example of both a good and a bad example of that coming up. So first I want to sort of talk about what are these things, what is a thing in the Internet of Things, what some of the background trends are that are related to this, do my existence proof example that some of this is already here, and then my counter example of how things can work in ways that might not result in the change that we would like, and then what are the opportunities, some of the challenges, and other future trends to think about. So for our purposes, a thing is something that's either sensing, analyzing, or acting on the physical world. So and so those consist of sensors, collect information from the physical world and report that measurement. There's an analysis component that goes with what do you do after you've got that information, and then an action component of, okay, now I've got that information, can I do something with it? And a lot of times when people are talking about the Internet of Things, they're talking about those things interacting with each other without humans in the loop necessarily. So I'm not sure how well this shows up. So this is just some background related to the growth of the Internet. So the blue dots are actual capacity growth inside the North Carolina Research and Education Network going back to 82, where we had 9.6 kilobits per second in the backbone. Now we have nearly 300 gig of capacity in the backbone, so things have changed a bit. The red dots are number of internet hosts over time, so there were maybe 1,000 in the early 80s. We're now in the billion range, and then the green dots are the number of users on the internet. We're in the many billions of range there. This is a log scale, by the way.
So log
so
scale, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, so
That's why it flattens out.
it flattens out because it's not, it's no longer on the linear log curve, although the capacity in NC-RIN is pretty much sticking to a linear log scale, which it's been on for 30 years. So,
Moore's law.
yes. So, and then there's a few things that we can point to that happened in the Apple Macintosh. Came out in 1984 when there was very little capacity. Google was created in 1998 and became a bird sometime after that. The iPod in 2001, which was consumed by the iPhone in 2007, and Facebook around 2005. It took a little while before that completely took over the world. It's interesting, Facebook produces no content of its own. So it's something to think about. Just a little bit of background on how things have been growing thus far. Part of the fuel for that is the price of PCs, thanks to Moore's law, has been dropping rather significantly, so 99.9% cheaper now than they were in 1980. I think the guy at lunch showed a similar graph to this of where the expectation is on Internet of Things versus just regular computers. So phones become a big part of that. Undescribed other things are the bulk of that growth that we don't necessarily have now. So Metcalfe's law says that the value of a telecommunications network is proportional to the square of the number of connected users. So if you go back to that, you would say that the value of our networks are going to go way up in the coming years. So my first example of a real life example of what's going on is the Boston Marathon instruments every single runner. I have a Boston Marathon race number here. Every one of the runners has one of those. They have RFID tags in the back. RFIDs may be the simplest Internet of Things example that you can think of. So it just responds with a number when it's hit with the proper radio signal. Although RFID is evolving and you can actually write to RFID tags now. So stores doing inventory on tags can mark them as sold, for example, when they leave the door. But on Monday, there will be over 30,000 Internet of Things enabled people starting the Boston Marathon and tracked throughout the race. You can track your favorite runner and see what their progress is along the course during the race. Of course, the race organizers will have all kinds of demographic data about the entire field, enabling them to plan in the future. If anybody wants to see that afterwards, they can. It's worth noting that the data rate that you can get out of an RFID tag is as high as 640 kilobits per second. So if you multiply that by 35,000 runners all in the same place, that's potentially quite a lot of bandwidth running down the streets of Boston or lots of these other kinds of marathons. So my other example, which is really the future is here part, is in the cycling world, there's now a very rich ecosystem of devices and collectors of that information that will measure everything from your heart rate to your cadence, how fast you're pedaling, the power you produce for the bicycle, the outside temperature, where you are, what the elevation is, how all those things are changing in time. They can be synced to the cloud and analyzed by social aspect to that, where you can compare what you're doing to other people with similar devices, and you can analyze, and perhaps if you're a serious kind of racer person, you can have Coach analyze your software. There also can be synced with live tracking. So I can give my wife a live tracking thing. She can make sure I didn't fall down and die in the woods when I'm riding on my bicycle kind of thing. You can integrate this with GoPro video. Everybody's seen video. Now you can connect that to the data. So what does that look like? So I have things here related to that. So you can, so this is a head unit like the one you see in the picture made by Garmin. This itself has GPS, it has Bluetooth, it has Wi-Fi, it has ANT+, which is the communications protocol for the sensors that go with it. So those sensors can include things, I have one here. Drop it.
So that's kind of a controller then?
So, and it's a display unit, so it lets you see what's going on. It also has GPS radios in it, so you can tell where you are and you can get directions if you need it. This is a cadence sensor, like the one you see on the left there, that measures how fast you're pedaling. This is a heart rate monitor. So some of the magic of this, and there's the picture of the bicycle, has a power meter which is built into the wheel, which will tell you exactly how much power you're putting out while you pedal. The magic that makes all this work is this protocol called ANT+, which is a wireless, extremely low power protocol, so the battery and the heart rate monitor can last a couple of years, for example, delivering heart rate data. So that's a key part of that, but it's a common standard for communicating. So the sensors from multiple manufacturers can be paired with the display unit, or you can switch display units off paired with different ones. So my watch that I'm actually wearing is actually another one that will talk to the same set of devices. They're optimized for different applications. So the big one for bikes and the watch for running. So it's the same technology. They both will sync with iPhones, and so this is what you get this is kind of the display you see on the device. It'll tell you elevation change, heart rate, how fast you're going. That syncs to the phone and up to the cloud. So when you're in the cloud, this is one example application. Because of open standards, you can run applications to analyze this from a variety of sources. This one, the middle picture there, is actually a heat map that shows what all the people with these devices in this area have been doing, where they've been going. So you can see the most popular routes. And so if you were a park operator, you could see where the most traffic is in your park, and you could plan maintenance to prioritize the most popular routes over the ones that are less popular. There's also a social aspect to this. So this is actually a picture of, you see what other people have done on specific sections of a route you might have ridden, and you can compare your times on that against other people that you don't necessarily have to know if you decide to share your data and find out how you compare. So there's this social media component to that too, or maybe you identify people who are similar ability and you can reach out to them and maybe find somebody to work with. And this last picture is another heat map plus GoPro video integration, so you can integrate the actual where you are on this one shows where you are on the map on the lower right, and some data about what you're doing, which will be mapped directly onto the video from your GoPro camera. So this is what all these Internet of Things kind of applications could do. You just pick your environment. If it's a building, you could do similar kinds of things. So this is the good example of where it could be, and it's the driver. The thing that makes that work is common standards and open interfaces, so that the development of each of these components can happen independent of one another. When you don't have that, say in personal medical devices, what happens is you end up with this vertical integration, and the manufacturers have to do all the components, even the ones they're not good in. So and no integration across devices. So things like the FDA approval, business model of the companies providing these devices result in much slower innovation than you see in an open environment. So examples of that are for diabetics now, you can get continuous glucose monitors that have a sensor mounted under the skin, and that connects to a unit that collects that data, and you can get a handheld device that will graph your glucose levels, but it's not a common standard across these devices, so you can't mix and match. You can also get glucose pumps, which have a device under the skin that will deliver glucose, and the pump controls that, but you have to transcribe the data that you got from your glucose monitor by hand into the pump to tell it what to do. So it's craziness, but it's because there are no common open standards between the sensors and the collectors and the actuators. That's beginning to change, but the rate compared to some of these sports devices is much lower. Hearing aids are very similar in this regard. So I don't know if any of you have hearing aids. My daughter happens to have bone conduction hearing aids, which are pretty sophisticated little devices, but when she has to have it adjusted, it means she has to go to an audiologist who wirelessly connects to a computer and asks her a bunch of questions, and she answers yes or no, and the audiologist clicks on radio buttons when she answers those questions, and then it adjusts the hearing aid. There's no reason that couldn't be an iPhone app that would do exactly the same thing. You want to reduce healthcare costs, then get rid of a bunch of visits where there's nothing but rote activity happening there, and then that would mean both the healthcare provider and the patient could be more efficient in their use of time. So this is a combination of the lack of standards and the entrenched business models and approval processes that go with medical devices, and the incumbents, as is typically the case, are reluctant to change the environment that's worked for them. So there's a lot of opportunities in this space. Certainly the personal instrumentation, lots of people, probably several people in this room have Fitbit kinds of things on their wrists. How many people have a Fitbit on right now? There's a bunch of them, right?
Wow, folks, keep your hands up. Everybody look around who has a Fitbit. Wow. That's more than I've seen in most audiences. That's really.
So the
Well,
same
smart.
kinds of analysis and social kinds of applications could easily be applied there. Home instrumentation and control, that's usually the refrigerator that knows when you need new milk is the common example there, and we heard about HVAC systems at lunchtime. Instrumentation of your community's wireless meter reading, trash pickup, the whole gamut there. And certainly those of you who were here earlier heard about farming applications, which are the same. It's applications of sensors and the like, and the ability to track what's happening in markets related to products you might want to sell. So even more trends at play here. So that graph I showed earlier of computing power will apply to the sensors as well. So we'll get more powerful sensors that can do more sophisticated information gathering. So an interesting example that I heard about just recently is there are a couple of physicists from UC Davis who've been working at CERN, and which is this gigantic.
Explain, sir.
So CERN is the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, the biggest physics experiment in the world, thousands of physicists. These guys wanted to do a smaller project where they could control the whole results themselves. They were sitting around the bar having a beer, and they realized smartphones that they had, the cameras in there were CMOS sensors, which are exactly the same sensors that are in the Large Hadron Collider. So they are writing an app that will monitor the sensors in phones and without opening the camera shutter, and whenever there's a reaction in the sensor, they know that was a cosmic ray hit. And by distributing this application widely, they can get millions of sensors distributed around the world to detect cosmic rays and do some real physics with that. Because cosmic rays are very rare events and don't happen very often, but if they can get you to use your app, which will only run when your phone is plugged in, so it doesn't drain your battery. It's a clever example of using a sensor that most of us already have with us. So computers are getting much faster. The handheld one is a Raspberry Pi, which is a $35 computer. Now has a gigabit network interface in it. Very general purpose Linux machine. The fingertip one is an Arduino microcontroller. So you can control programmable, controllable, open interface device that'll let you manage lots of things. So these are getting smaller and more capable all the time. So imagine what you could do if the race number for the Boston Marathon was also collecting heart rate and had more specific data about the individual runners there. And if you have a medical problem, you could detect it immediately and send first aid crews there before anybody around them even knew what was happening. So some of the challenges there are that, like we said in the medical example, lack of relevant standards and APIs. So where these don't exist, innovation slows dramatically. Entrenched business models, people who build their business model on the vertical integration are not interested in seeing that change. Connectivity is going to be an increasingly big issue there. So any individual device is not a huge contributor to bandwidth, but it's so easy to have a lot of them, and they're so inexpensive. This is going to, and of course, the trend is each device is going to be able to push more bandwidth. So if you're in a rural part of the country and you don't have good bandwidth, you're going to be locked out with much of this capability. So I had another. I didn't touch on policy, but policy is a big piece of this too. What does this say about privacy, provenance of the data? So if you're collecting certain kinds of data, you might need to know what the history of that is, how it was collected, etc. I mean, if you're trying to do a scientific experiment, you need to know the history of the data so somebody can repeat it. If you're collecting medical data, it'd be good to know this is the actual data and somebody hasn't hacked it so that you get the wrong medicine. So and security, of course. So if somebody doesn't hack it, or hack your glucose delivery system, could cause some real problems. So I added one extra slide before my questions, just as an example, the sensors and radios that are in an iPhone 6. So there's a proximity sensor, an ambient light sensor, 2 accelerometers, a magnetometer, which the compass application uses, a gyroscope, and of course the camera sensor that you have in your pocket. And they have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, near field communications, and of course the cell radio in them. This is pretty.
Can you show me? Shake it and show it.
Oh, yeah. So I have another iPhone app real quick. It's a seismograph. Uses the accelerometer in the phone, and so if you shake it, you can see the change. So one of these is not very useful as a seismograph because I might be on a bus and it's bumpy. But if I have a bunch of people in a city doing it and I see everybody's move at the same time, then I can deduce that that was perhaps an earthquake and not everybody probably wasn't on the bus. Of course, I have location information on the phone too, so I can probably identify the epicenter of the earthquake. And is there anybody in this room that does not have a smartphone? Oh, I didn't think so. All right, any questions? All right, Steve.
We'll get to questions also after we have John, but I think y'all can see why my life working as a peer of Mark's has just been an everyday that we get together, an incredible, exciting day. He thinks of everything in the world and deals with all of this and has helped make NC REN the sort of top research and education network across the country. So We're glad to have you here. And he really thought all this stuff up. I was pushing him to try to bring it up, and I thought he showed you how much is out there today already that most of us aren't aware of.
Looking
And
for
how?
a roll, where's the?
He's got it over there,
Okay,
so.
found still, do you have room? We need another one, right? It's getting close to the end. Okay, I'll give you another one.
I'm going to call him John down with Fujitsu, and he's going to come up and do the presentation for him. Dave, you need to come check. And Dave Kelton, who's been with us all day, wonderful guy, who's a contractor, I assume, for this. And you can tell us the name of your company if anyone's here from Austin.
ABTS.
ABTS. And he's been with us and doing a great job. So, Dave. While he's talking about this, I will just tell you that back in 1987, between Mark over at NC Ren and the Chapel Hill Hospital, that we had a FedEx Fujitsu switch that went between a supercomputer and the radiologist, the top one over at Chapel Hill, and they could get 2,000 hits on your cancer tumor in a matter of seconds, compared to having to move those things every 5 minutes to get the right place to shoot that beam to try to get the cancer you had. So Fujitsu has been involved with us in North Carolina, not even into their knowledge about him being on the program for a many number of years, and been an incredible company with us. So, John?
Thank you very much. What do you think is our number of sensors that you are carrying at this very moment with yourself in your pockets? Can you guess how many sensors or Internet of Things that you're carrying at this very moment in your pockets? Anyone?
I'll go with 6.
Well, we know if you have iPhone 6, you already have 11, right? And if you're like me, got one of this new Visa card with microchip built in, it's probably another one here, at least one. And obviously, there are a whole lot more, right? I mean, I've got some examples of some of the devices getting so small that literally just about everywhere. One other example is, for example, how many of you know that when you post something in Facebook or you take a picture of any camera nowadays, it knows your location, the physical location. You ever wonder when you take a picture and you're trying to post it in Facebook, it says the location, it kind of suggests you where you're at? So they've been using this for a while. So my presentation is all about how do you use it in rural America, right? And examples with things that we're already doing and what to look forward to. So I'm not going to spend too much time on what is Internet of Things, as my co-presenter already talked quite a bit about it. I'm going to talk about the usage in rural America, how it can improve specifically in grid reliability, and any questions you might have. So I've been in the industry for 27 years, actually, in the energy and utility space and telecom space. And I'm involved with UTC and NRCA and University of Tulsa's Masters of Energy program. So what is Internet of Things? It's a smart environment. Basically, it's a network of various things and objects out there connected through wired or wireless network. You can communicate and share information if you like, or you can talk to each other like machine to machine. So Internet of Things is nothing new, by the way, right? All of us know that machine to machine communication existed for a long, long time. Yesterday I rented a car. It tells me how close I am to the car in front of me or next to me. So now this car was telling me if I'm too close to the car in front of me, it beeps and tells me, not to be so close, right? It's a red beep. I like that. So things are coming to us at a very fast pace But though we have seen this, we have seen the machine-to-machine communications for a long time. Especially if you're in the utility space, we've been using sensors to detect the condition of boiler in a plant location. We've been detecting the voltage and the current in the electrical lines as well. So there are a whole lot more things that we've been doing, but with the smart meters and the smart grid, we're doing a whole lot more. So basically, it could be, sensors will be using in the future will help us make those intelligent decisions. So it's not just one way. So some of the forecasts, I think during lunchtime, we heard from Intel, and they also talked about this growth in machine-to-machine, if you will, or Internet of Things. One thing about, I keep saying machine-to-machine because I'm one of those people that when marketing people come up with the new terms like IoT, I connect that to what I know, which is, come on, you're talking about machine-to-machine. So you call it IoT. It's just like cloud, right? Cloud, come on. We've been doing cloud for a longest time. Model have changed, no doubt. So is in IoT space, I believe. So, but what nice about it today versus yesterday is that we have the bandwidth that is available to us, or at least we're getting in that direction. So you can create an open and global network that can communicate amongst each other. So picture this with me for a second. Imagine in the utility space, if you're in rural America, our customer, for example, Kit Carson Electric is here, and they buy their capacity, if you will, electricity from Tri-State generation. So they don't have their own generation capacity at Kit Carson. So now, as a co-op, they've been selling utilities at a very cheap rate to their members. Tri-State increased their rate. Now they have to pass that rate along to their end customers, members. And they don't like that, right? Nobody likes to pay more, and especially when it's a co-op. Now, so what should they do to change this? And as they cannot have any control over what generation companies gonna, how they're gonna price it in the future. So one of the things is that, energy efficiency. So if you can do energy efficiency by using smart meters, and then you can do smart homes, you can perhaps change the behavior so the consumption within that home, and if each home does something about their consumption through smart meter or smart devices, you can control the usage, so perhaps the usage can come down from that consumption, and so you will be using less energy, right? That's one way. Another thing you can do is that you have solar panels, or you might have wind or some other clean energy that you can utilize, and that in totality then decrease the usage so that you don't have to buy as much anymore from Tri-State, so you don't have to pay more for your usage. So someday, very soon, in the utility space, we've been trying to do that for a long time. One of the biggest challenges we have right now is how do we get all this information from renewables as they are intermittent, right? During the day you have solar, at night you don't have solar. So imagine if we can connect all this information, and then we have a virtual power, if you will. So we request for energy, we meaning as a company, Kit Carson, from Tri-State as they need it, not as a blanket, a minimum to a peak rate. So we can essentially have a virtual power plant, if you will, through Internet of Things, if we can connect those dots and use the cloud to share information amongst different utilities. You can imagine that Tri-State would want to know as well that what parts of their customers, the other co-ops within 4-state, actually they call tri-state, it's 4-state. So what other demands they might have with other utilities so that they can appropriately allocate that peak demand, if you will, for that moment to Kit Carson. So these are all the possibility because of the Internet of Things, along with the network ability and the cloud computing. So to go on to details, if you will, in the consumption level, you have smart cars, as I mentioned, my car, right? And you're gonna have electric vehicles. Electric vehicles itself present a very large challenge to utilities, because imagine in the city I live in, Dallas, where a lot more EVs around. So somebody can, in my community, there are an average of 12 homes to a transformer. And if there are 3 of us with the electric vehicle comes in and at 5 o'clock and plugs that into our electrical network, the transformer will blow up. So everybody will be out of power. So that alone is a problem. But with the smart cars, with the sensors, perhaps we can use the information to better manage that. So we can, for electric companies' perspective, or rural electric co-ops, they can sort of measure and send signals to the users as to what time they should plug in, right? So a whole lot of opportunities. Smart homes, again, we talked about there are lots of opportunities out there, from energy consumptions to the refrigerator tells you when your milk is going to go out. Now, years ago, I worked for IBM 10 years, and that was 5 years ago when I left, and we had a lab here in Austin in 2005, had that refrigerator as well as the oven that actually cooks the turkey for you or whatever dish you want to cook. You leave it there and it thaws out, and then start cooking and calculating times when you're going to get home. And back then we could change if you get stuck in traffic or a meeting, you can change the timing from your cell phone. And that was futuristic back then. But today, almost every single appliance manufacturer are deploying those sensors, if you will, the smart devices into those appliances. So that alone is going to bring a whole lot more information to that meter that co-ops can utilize to better manage the energy consumption to a problem I just talked about earlier about managing peak demand. So smart meter itself presents additional opportunities. How many of you have deployed smart meters or have smart meters? So as you know, smart meters, we in the industry not even using 1/10 of the information collected by smart meters. The voltage and the current information, for example, could be utilized to even better manage the grid itself. So some countries like Brazil, I was working with some of the utilities out there, and they have a problem of voltage spikes, which causes your appliance to go out, and people come in and either they blew it out themselves or actually voltage problem, they'll bring their appliances to the electric company and they collect the money for that appliance. By law, they have to do this. Now, those smart meters actually captures that information, and they can actually verify exactly when that spike really happened. So, in utilities perspective in America, we've been, we're front and center of this smart grid revolution, and we're not even using 1/10 of that information that collected within our smart meter next to our house. So there are a whole lot of additional opportunities there. From a transmission and distribution level, smart sensors, smart transformers. These are things to come, right? So smart sensors, for example. We've been using sensors for a long time, as I mentioned earlier. The biggest problem we always had is that communications weren't there. So I know some of you probably know that there are some sensors in the grid line, even in Texas, in Dallas, where I live. In the low voltage, medium voltage line, there is a sensor, and sometimes the red light comes on. Basically, that tells you that there's an outage or problem in that particular area, so the person driving in to fix that problem, they can see, oh, that's where it is. And so they drive up and down in the line to figure out exactly where the red light is. And the red light existed because the communications module wasn't there. The communications module used to be pretty large with lots of battery. It used a lot of battery consumption. So with that battery consumption, basically the size of it, the communications module itself was so big that it wasn't feasible back then. But today, it's very much feasible. So now that person doesn't have to go up and down the line. As well as things like when a tree falls or a tree branch that kind of hits the electric line, it can tell, the sensors can tell if it's a tree branch just, because the wind is touching the line, or is there other reasons? There are some different sensor types, or not sensor types, sorry, different types of patterns that tells the electric company what to do and when to go and take an action based on that information. So our transmission distribution lines also will be impacted, and the information will be collected to improve the reliability. So in the rural America, one of the problem is, for example, the smart meters is pretty expensive to deploy, and especially if you don't have the some type of fiber network into your substations, it's not possible. But today, because we're in Broadband America's conference, right, which is the holy grail, I think, of Internet of Things, if you have broadband to that home, now you can collect not only for smart meters and smart grid, you can collect this consumption, the information about security, home security, to if it's milk going bad or not. All that information can be collected through that network. Otherwise, you'll be continuing to pay those high bills to your cell providers, right? But if you have that fiber into that home, that gives you today a gig of worth of capacity, right? That you can do a whole lot information you can collect. Why do you think, anybody from Google here, before I say anything bad about Google? Anyone? So why do you think Google is doing fiber? Because they want to be an internet service provider? Anyone?
They want to shame the incumbents.
No, sir. They want to collect data. They want to collect data. That's the business they're in selling data. So if they know what time I eat and what I eat, because my refrigerator is going to tell them if it's a frozen steak that I'm taking out, or something else that I'm eating versus not, what time, what's a pattern, that's the information. So this collection of the data is the business they're in. That's why the primary reason, right? I mean, there are a whole lot of other reasons they have, which is they sell content. So content is king, so you need bandwidth. But anyways, my point is, if you have that fiber in rural America, in the homes, not only you close that digital divide, you also take advantage of it to benefit the consumers as well as the company you represent. At the city level, we haven't even touched on this smart transportation. So again, smart transportation has been going on, the whole kind of thinking towards how to manage traffic in New York City or Paris or Stockholm. they've been doing this for a long, long time, trying to figure out how to manage this thing. For example, did you know in London, 10 years ago, they implemented smart transportation, and if you have certain type of license plate, you can only drive X number of days a week. Certain number of days you can drive into London. Other days you get fined. Stockholm did that 12 years ago. So this,
Singapore 12 years ago.
I'm sorry?
Singapore 12 years ago.
Singapore 12 years ago. So, these cities are doing this, and back then they just looked at just from managing the traffic jam, if you will, or the parking space. Today, the smart transportation includes, where's the location of your bus that it's coming, you're waiting on, to, how many people riding on that particular truck or a train, for example. So smart safety and security comes along with it. For example, we're looking at the technology that with the IoT, a first responder can get that information from your home. If you have a fire or some kind of security threat, that information could be sent to first responder as they approach your location, so that they're better prepared when, what to expect when they come to your place. So there are great opportunities, I think, in rural America to advance it. I think there are a whole lot more in the security space, the homeland security space. Anybody working on homeland security or any of those initiatives? So, for example, I was involved with City of Chicago, their first responder initiative that started many, many years ago. But one of the things about rural America, when we were working with cities outside of Chicago, rural Illinois, and we're thinking about how do they respond to an event that could happen in Chicago, because they have to help Chicago, people in Chicago as well. So the information that has to go to each and every single organization within a particular geography for some type of a natural disaster, and that is enabled by IoT. So I think as a company, obviously, we love bandwidth because we're Fujitsu, but also the fact that our customers, we're excited that customers are deploying fiber to each one of the homes. A lot of people are already started that initiative. We hope that others will do, because we think that Internet of Things is going to impact everyone, and mostly you got to have that plumbing, if you will, I call it plumbing, that baseline bandwidth available to enable your city, your company, or your home. Thank you.
Well, we got started just a little bit late, and I would say to you that we have another program coming up, but what we wanted you to see in this session was a couple of things. One, Mark talking about making it real to you, what's already out there personally, what can be things you're carrying around, the sensors you're walking around with, and some of the ideas that are happening, the guys from CERN and from out in California, how they could use this to really advance science, etc. But also the impact it can have on you and the economic development possibilities there are in this whole arena, and the impact on rural America. John obviously talking about the whole utility and electrical side and all the issues there for rural America. Just think about one thing about rural America. Unless it has the broadband it needs, it's not going to be able to have houses that can buy HVAC systems, or houses that can buy smart washing machines, or smart stoves. Of course, I won't be affected by that because I store books on my stove in the oven. So anyway, I have done that for 35 years. My husband and I eat out a lot, but anyway. But I would say to you that's what bothers me about the whole area of broadband, is what it will prevent us from doing in rural America, and how it will prevent us from having the economic development ideas that we can move forward with to create the jobs, to create the ability to live in rural America and work in a city for that matter. So this is a real issue we wanted to bring to you today from Rural Telecom itself. I'm going to ask Mark and them if they could sort of hang around the back and you can ask questions, because we really don't we don't have the time to without hurting the next program, etc. But we are taping these, and we're going to place them on our website, and you'll be able to get the audio and the slides. And we may even do a webinar and try to get John and Mark back to answer questions for those of you who might have those. Do you think that would be something interesting to people? You think people would be, okay, we will try and do that then. I want to thank both of them for the tremendous kind of knowledge they bring to us. And let me just add up one other thing. In North Carolina in 1984 or 1991, some of us they said, hey, what's going to happen to the whole field of health and information technology? What's going to happen there? What about in our state pulling together everybody who is in the ecosystem? We pulled together everybody who is in an ecosystem. The banks, we pulled together the medical schools, we pulled together the hospitals, we pulled together the law schools, we pulled together businesses who were in this whole sector of healthcare, of people who analyze data, etc. If you ever heard of Quintiles, which was just beginning to be thought of then, huge now in terms of the way it deals with collecting information on drug development, etc. We got everybody together. IBM was there, Ericsson, 25, Fujitsu was there, $25,000 for 3 years they joined. It is now 24 years old. It was the group that worked with, who developed the HIPAA regulations, don't shout at it, but developed them among themselves saying we could live with this. As an ecosystem, we could live with this. And they gave it to John Fanning at HHS, and he wrote the rules for HIPAA. Then they got ahead of this curve. They got in the marketplace and began making all kinds of money, all these different groups, and with the knowledge of that. And then the second thing is when the whole issue of healthcare for America came, they got involved in going after with RTI and with IBM. RTI is a Research Triangle Institute. And 2 of the 3 initiatives to look at healthcare for America that they were doing at HHS were run by groups in North Carolina. If you don't think that didn't help people start companies and all kinds of new initiatives for entrepreneurs. And so you can get ahead in the Internet of Things. You can get in your states groups together to begin to look at this and what will happen in your state, in your region with the Internet of Things. So we just want to challenge you on behalf of rural America and those of us who want to live another 100 years, okay, to be able to start working in rural America to look at this. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about healthcare. And we have Michael Keeling from Arizona, and we have Dave Kirby from North Carolina. And you're going to see a whole interesting new aspect of the laws with telemedicine and what has to be done. And then the security, the privacy, and nonprofits running networks. And again, how much money can come from the federal government to fund the North Carolina Telehealth Network. So we want to thank you for coming. And please come to the next one, okay? And they'll hang out back outside the door, okay?
Yep.
And thanks to Fujitsu. Let's give them a big hand. Come on. I'm going to ask Mike and David to come forward.